We've had some choppy price action recently, so it's worth taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture for Bitcoin and strategy. Today, we'll take a data-driven approach to better understand what's likely to come for BTC and MSTR. So let's get right into it. And first, we'll start with the short-term holder realized price chart we have here on BitcoinMagazinePro.com. Now, this is looking at the cost basis or average accumulation price for new market participants. Now, what we can see is when Bitcoin is in these periods of consolidation or slight pullbacks, we usually see this flatlining or slightly declining. And of course, when price is increasing, new investors have to buy at a slightly higher price. But recently, this surpassed a pretty big milestone. It crossed above $100,000, something it had been flirting with for multiple weeks. But as soon as it crossed 100K, it's radically increased very quickly to over $105,000. So even though recently we've had a bit of choppy, boring consolidation, of course, we're very close to new all-time highs, but people in this space have pretty short patience, a lack of patience. They're constantly wanting big, new, euphoric moves all the time, which we'd all love to have, but unfortunately just isn't the reality. But still, this is an incredibly bullish indication of continued new market participant confidence and bullish outlook for the asset. The only thing that I'd say slightly concerns me and maybe points towards us not immediately continuing to rally higher is the Bitcoin funding rates are still slightly elevated. Even though we've had this slightly choppy consolidationary period, people are continuing to leverage long Bitcoin, which typically the market punishes the most participants. So if we see incredibly high funding rates, of course, these aren't incredibly high right now, but the fact that these haven't declined at all in the past few days, even as prices had this, slight retracement and choppy period, gives me some kind of slight inkling that we might see a little bit of a punishment move in the market, potentially liquidating a few of the long positions before the market can really move higher. But ultimately, this is short term. If we zoom out, like I said, and take a purely data-driven approach to the market, everything looks good. Everything looks bullish. If we look at the short-term holder supply, it looks like we are just at the start of one of these big moves that we've seen multiple times in this cycle already. If I just zoom back out again, we can see this bottomed out at just under 4 million a month or so ago and has already increased to about 4.3 million Bitcoin held by new market participants. So, I mean, this is only 250,000 Bitcoin which has shifted hands. If you look at the big moves we've already seen this cycle, like we saw at the big run up to $74,000, this started at about 3.275 million Bitcoin and went to about 5 million, so about 1.75, we'll say. Million Bitcoin accumulated by new market participants. And on the run up to above $100,000, this started about 3.6 million and went up to about 5.5 million. So again, nearly 2 million Bitcoin. So if we've only seen about 250,000 Bitcoin shift hands and really accelerate this upside move in the Bitcoin price action, then we may only be a sixth or an eighth of the way through this big move. That doesn't necessarily mean a sixth or an eighth of the way through the percentage increases we'll see to the upside, but the amount of new liquidity coming into the market is incredibly bullish to see at new all-time highs. Again, pretty typical for this stage in a cycle, but really outlines the upside potential we have remaining. And what really shows that we have some strength is, of course, it's been a big talking point and something we covered on the channel last week, is looking at the whale shadows, this big transaction of over 80,000 Bitcoin by a single holder. Now, of course, when nearly $10 billion of Bitcoin is moved, it obviously causes a little bit of a reaction. And I'll admit I was slightly wrong on this. I thought this Bitcoin would be slowly scaled out, potentially OTC over the course of weeks or months and have very little impact on the open spot markets. As it was transferred to Galaxy Digital, I thought that this would be something done in the background, but I was wrong. In a very short space of time, from July the 4th to July 25th, so 3 weeks, 80,000 Bitcoin was sold just on the open spot markets, which is just pretty crazy. I mean, this shows an unbelievable amount of strength in the Bitcoin price action. If we just very quickly go to TradingView here and look at the Bitcoin price, we can see that since this occurred on July the 4th, this first transaction happened, which was, all the way back here. But even just from the most recent highs we've had to the most recent lows we've had, this is only a few percent. Excluding the wicks, if we just go to closing prices, we're talking about a decrease in the Bitcoin price of less than 2%. As 80,000, nearly 10 billion Bitcoin was sold on the open market. When we have these big wicks to the downside, it really indicates that people aren't letting price dip that low. People are reaccumulating, and this new level of support we've created around $115,000 to $116,000 really looks to be a pretty strong foundational level of support that hopefully we can build a foundation at to continue this move higher. Now, of course, we have had this little bit of choppy consolidation recently, like we've said, which are, of course, leading people to think that we've already topped and we're now going to have this big extending bear cycle. Look at previous cycles. When we have this long, slow period of consolidation at new all-time highs, this doesn't indicate that we've already topped out. Even in the double top price action peaks, we can see every time we had these tops, it was after a big euphoric run up and we had an immediate big decline in price action. We don't hover 2% beneath all-time highs when price action has peaked. The 2017 is probably the best indication of that. We had this huge run up, huge decline. Of course, the faster we go up, the faster we come down, but it's a really good indication that people are still willing to accumulate Bitcoin at incredibly, let's be honest, high prices after we've had this big run up. It really just shows how much interest there is in Bitcoin. Now, of course, if we just go back to Safari, back to the internet here, what we can see is, again, this was outlined by Joe Consorti, good friend of mine, big friend of the channel who's been with us before. I might have to have him back on the channel in the near future. He really outlined it here. 80,000 Bitcoin, over $9 billion was sold into the open market order books, which is just crazy. I don't think anyone really anticipated that that would be the case, but there you go. Bitcoin price barely moved following that. Now we'll get into some more Bitcoin metrics a little bit later, but today we're going to be covering not just BTC, but MSTR and Strategy as well, because there's been some big news in that side of things. What we can see is Strategy have announced a proposed initial public offering of the STRC stock. Now we can see that this has already come to fruition, but essentially what this is trying to do is provide a derivative product, STRC, which is essentially going to be a yield-bearing stablecoin. Now that sounds a little bit crazy, but they are essentially trying to keep the price of this product at $100 per share. And they're looking to raise $500 million. All we can see is they raised over $2.5 billion. So far exceeded their even Strategies and Michael Saylor's own expectations of how popular this product would be. And this is, like I said, something that's really tapping into a slightly different market than we've really seen. Now, Dylan Leclerc, another good friend, has posted this chart here. I'm not sure if it was from him. It looks like it was made by Strategy themselves, which really shows how this product is slightly different to what we've already seen in Strife and Strike and Stride, etc. This is a effectively zero duration product. It's going to be providing 9% annual yield for something that can just be freely traded in and out of at a very steady price. Now, this provides exposure to a new market, a new part of the asset financial world, in that it is stable money. We can see all the previous MSTR derivative products are essentially trying to tap into the bond market by providing these, long duration yield bearing products. But STRC Stretch is going to be this new asset, is going to try and tap into this $120 trillion money industry. Suddenly, if you can get 9% interest on a derivative product that's remaining at a very similar price, there is a huge amount of potential of capital inflows into the product. And of course, that is ultimately going to trickle down into more and more Bitcoin accumulation. I mean, $2.5 billion worth of investment already is already tens of thousands of Bitcoin. Imagine what happens when even 1% of this $120 trillion flows into this product. Of course, it's if, buts, and maybes, but especially considering Strategy have recently been approved for qualification into the S&P 500, which opens the doors to billions, if not trillions of dollars of capital inflows into the stock. The upside potential for Strategy and of course their continued accumulation of Bitcoin just continues to remain incredibly high and bullish. And again, another video from Joe Consorti here. I'll be the first to admit, I'm not a complete expert on these products. I'm not a complete expert on the yield-bearing nature of all of these MSTR derivative products. So I actually watched this video. It's a great video. If you haven't already, if you don't follow, definitely give him a follow. He's a great follower, as are Dylan Leclerc and lots of other great on-chain analysts. But what we can see is if this continues to result in more and more Bitcoin accumulated for Strategy, at their current rate of accumulation, this is likely going to result in somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000 BTC accumulated in 2025 alone. And this is excluding the potentially billions of dollars of inflows due to their new product, excluding the potentially $1 billion of inflows due to their S&P 500 inclusion. So of course, this may be slightly undershooting it. But if we take a very conservative net asset value premium ratio of potentially 1.5 at market peak of 700,000 Bitcoin accumulated, that still gives us a share price of over $800 Now, I'm going to slightly give away the chart we'll be looking at next, but if we just go to the Treasury data here, we can see that this is a massive asymmetric opportunity for people who are currently holding or looking to potentially accumulate MSTR. Now, I wouldn't go all in on this, of course. I do think that you should have a diversified asset portfolio that definitely includes some spot Bitcoin, because essentially this is just a high beta leverage play of Bitcoin anyway. But we can see, just looking at the potential valuations here, this provides a 2x pretty, I won't say pretty easily. Nothing in investing is easy or simple or predictable, and of course, this is based on $170,000 Bitcoin price action. But what we can see is that's very realistic probability. If they can get to 800,000, that could lead to a stock price of $920. And if we expand this massively to say, rather than a 1.5 net asset value premium, if we go to a 2.5, suddenly we have a range that goes up to about $1,500 per share. This is just an unbelievable opportunity. And like we can see, they are still outperforming Bitcoin. And of course, their big outperformance may be diminishing due to the fact that we're getting other treasury companies which can potentially provide slightly higher returns due to the fact that they have smaller market cap and potentially are more aggressively accumulating Bitcoin when looking at the percentage of their market cap. But what we can see is, due to the things we've outlined previously, their new derivative offerings, their potential inclusion into the biggest index in the world, I struggle to see an outcome where MSTR doesn't have a huge period of outperformance. And of course, this is going to be dependent on the Bitcoin price action. This valuation was based on 170k Bitcoin price. Will it reach that high? We have no idea. Even if we go to 140,000 and outline the same region of price action here, it still gives us a price action region around $660 to around, just say, $1,300 for MSTR. So I still think there is a huge potential for outperformance. And if we look at some metrics like the MVRV Z-score on a 2-year rolling basis, it really outlines how much upside potential Bitcoin has remaining. We're still nowhere near territories where we'd really consider us to be at a market peak. Now, this is a little different to the MVRV Z-score, which is standard, which is just looking at the ratio between the realized price, the average accumulation price or cost basis of Bitcoin, and the underlying market cap or price of Bitcoin, and just standardizing that. This is on a 2-year rolling basis, so it's accounting for the changing supply and demand economics of the network. It's not massively influenced every single cycle by a growing market cap and diminishing volatility. This is adapting to the changing market conditions and isn't giving us diminishing peaks. We've already had one spike above this level in this cycle already, but I definitely see us reaching values of 2 or potentially 3 and above through the remainder of this cycle. And the reasons that I still have this bullish outlook is we're continuing to see liquidity expand. We're seeing new all-time highs in the global M2 supply. We're seeing the US dollar strength index and fiat currencies losing purchasing power as the money printers continue to go. And all of this is going to trickle down and flow into assets that can provide returns, potentially more stable yield-bearing assets like MSTR's new STRC product, and of course more speculative risk-on products like Bitcoin, which have historically been one of the best performing assets in history. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. And make sure to check out all the resources we discussed today, as well as the many more that are all available on BitcoinMagazinePro.com, your #1 source for Bitcoin analysis. So just to summarize, we've recently witnessed a consolidation and dip in the Bitcoin and strategy prices. I didn't even need to show the price action charts of these. If you just zoom out and look on the weekly and monthly, we've only had a few days of price action higher than what we're currently seeing. There's no need to panic. I know we're down 10-20% if we're looking at MSTR. I know we're down slightly in the Bitcoin price action, but just zoom out. Things look incredibly bullish. Everything looks incredibly normal and healthy. And the fact that we're having these run-ups, retracements to fundamental levels of support before building solid foundations to move higher is incredibly bullish for the Bitcoin price action and the MSTR price action. I know we'd all love to see just massive non-stop exponential run-ups, but that simply isn't sustainable. If we can see Bitcoin and MSTR having this very slow grind up, it allows new capital to flow in and think that they're getting, well, realize that they are getting good value for money and increase the upside potential of the asset and potentially extend the bull cycle into 2025 Q4 and potentially even into 2026. And the fact that we've seen nearly $10 billion of BTC being sold on the open markets and price retraced just a few percent, it really outlines the monumental buying pressure for Bitcoin, even as we're close to new highs. And especially alongside MSTR's new STRC product, which has massively surpassed expectations, we're going to see a new product that they're going to use to accumulate even more Bitcoin and allow billions, potentially trillions of dollars to flow into a new asset, into a new industry that just massively increases the potential for MSTR's own potential and the Bitcoin accumulation. And what we can see looking at things like the MVRV Z-score on a 2-year rolling basis, global liquidity, the US dollar strength index, Bitcoin has almost certainly not topped out. Now, of course, we're pretty correlated to the S&P 500, which continues to run to new all-time highs. But if we do see a black swan event, of course, none of this can be predicted, then Bitcoin is likely to struggle. But just zooming out, anyone that's giving bear posts, anyone that's saying we're going to have this big global recession, is really missing the big picture here. These assets, even the S&P, let's take that for example, isn't necessarily a reflection on the underlying strength of an economy or the potential for new companies to provide new massive inventions which are going to revolutionize the world in the coming months and years. They are assets that investors use to protect their wealth and purchasing power. If you look at COVID 2020, everyone was locked indoors for a couple of years, and we saw the S&P 500 rally non-stop to new all-time highs because people had capital that they didn't want to lose their purchasing power with. We're going to see capital rotate into these more risk-on and speculative assets if the macroeconomic conditions point towards that being the favorable way to just retain your purchasing power, retain your wealth. And of course, if we do see this continue to happen, Bitcoin's going to have some positive price action, MSTR is going to follow, potentially even lead the Bitcoin price action. But ultimately, just zoom out, this is all very normal, very healthy, and very bullish for the upcoming weeks and months for both of these two assets. If you like this video, then please visit BitcoinMagazine.com, where our analytics help you to cut through the noise to make informed, data-driven decisions about Bitcoin. With over 150 live charts, personalized indicator alerts, in-depth crypto industry reports, API access, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. And let me know what your thoughts are on the current Bitcoin and MSTR markets. Do you think that we are overdue some potentially more bullish price action? Or do you think that this recent consolidation is going to lead to more extending and deeper retracement in these two assets? As I said, let me know in the comments below and on social media. I look forward to reading and replying to them. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.